Good morning and welcome to Celtic Colours 2021 and to our little conversation we're going to have this morning. It's called A Conversation with the Founders. I'm here with my co-founder, Max MacDonald.
And my co-founder, Joella Foulds. And we're just wondering where you people have been. We've been waiting for you. We're just going to have a very relaxed chat here. We're happy to have Dawn Beaton, the current artistic director, in the room, and she'll be looking and asking some of the questions you can submit through YouTube or
Facebook,
maybe
website.
Instagram, website. There's lots of different ways to reach us. So feel free to do that. And I think we should just have a chat, Joella.
Let's just have a chat.
Let's just have a chat.
We don't get a chance to have a chat very often because we're both we're put out to pasture now. We're both retired, and we're just here looking back and at some of the exciting things that we went through and some of the difficult things that we went through, and some of the just fun we had.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think when people look at Celtic Colours now, they see this amazing event that's been happening for 25 years. And just assume that it was always kind of there, and it was kind of, it's kind of a no-brainer, really, to do this wonderful festival. And we thought that we'd have a little chat about some of our experiences in the early days and what it was like to launch this idea, because it was just an idea at one point in our heads.
Well, it was an idea, and it was a really unique idea.
It was.
And that was what was both scary and exciting at the time, because there were some things that were happening. Like Max and I started working together first during the East Coast Music Awards in 1995, because Max was the chair of the board and I was this coordinator person. And by the time we finished that process, we were not only exhausted, but we immediately felt that there was so much opportunity with our artists here that was not being realized. And we started talking, didn't we?
Yeah, we were very excited about, that seemed to work okay. I mean, we did the first award show in an arena in Canada. The Juno people came down to look at how we did it, and we realized, my heavens, we've got such a wealth of artists, of technical people, of facilities, and and we enjoyed working together. So let's do some more stuff.
Yeah, so we did, and we actually formed a company together.
Yeah,
I had a
Entertainment.
little company ahead of time, but I kind of dropped that because we put it all together. And then, started to think about, okay, what do we want to do with this? And just went from there. I mean, we had some friends who had gone over to a brand new festival in Scotland, in Glasgow.
Celtic Connections.
Celtic Connections.
Yeah.
And they came back just glowing and excited and said, you guys have to go. So we had no money, of course. We had just set up this business of our own. We had no way of getting ourselves there. We just said, come hell or high water, we have to go. So we did.
Yeah. And it was around the same time, this was sort of 95, 96, and there was a provincial funding program that was being launched called the Year of Music. It became the Years of Music. And this was music to our ears. And we thought, okay, Years of Music funding. This is what we do. We create things. What can we do that would be? And the notion of the festival came pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think so. I think we just didn't know what that looked like, did we?
We had no idea what it looked like. And that was the reason really going to Glasgow for some inspiration hit us. And we did that. And I remember walking into the Festival Club, which an idea that we borrowed from Celtic Connections, walking into the sea of humanity. I'd never been to Scotland before, walking into this festival, not knowing a single person, at least that we could see, and turning to Joella and saying, okay, you go that way, I'll go this way, and let's just see what happens. And the most amazing things happened.
Yeah, well, we met people that have remained to this day, friends and colleagues and so on, who really helped steer us and And one of the important connections that you made right off the top that night was meeting Karsten Panduro from Denmark, from the Toner Festival in Denmark, and telling him our ideas. Well, here's our situation.
Karsten, one of the most respected festival producers in Europe, produced an enormous event in a small town in Denmark. And I was introduced to him by Tony McManus, who I didn't even know he was a guitar player at the time. Later became a festival favorite here. And Karsten was just, well, tell me about this idea. And he listened for a couple of minutes, and he said, well, how can I help? And I was just gobsmacked. I mean, I didn't even at that point even really appreciate what an immense character he was on the music scene. I probably didn't appreciate that, but he was, and he just wanted to help.
Yeah.
He just said, you must do this, and I will help you in any way possible. And he helped us in enormous ways. Carson, I'd love it if you were out there, and we love you still to this day and forever. And hello, Annie.
Yeah.
But these were the type of wonderful people that we were fortunate enough to run into time after time.
Yeah, yeah. No, we had a lot of good fortune, like timing. The Years of Music thing is one of the things that you mentioned, and we had a number of things along the way that were good from a timing perspective, and we also had struggles just because of how much it costs to do a festival like this. Maybe we should see if there's any questions that have come in.
Actually, yeah, there was, let's see here, wanting to know how the name Celtic Colours came about.
Somebody wants to know how the name Celtic Colours came about.
Another friend and wonderful connection. We had the idea for the festival, and it looks 25 years later very much like the idea that we hatched. And we knew that we wanted to apply through the Year of Music for funding to launch this thing. And a friend of ours, a wonderful guy in Halifax, Brooks Diamond, was involved in some way in that program, whether he was on a jury or I don't know what.
I don't know what his connection was, but I think because of his status as a producer of music and events and
very
stuff.
Very well-known guy who produced festivals himself, the Atlantic Folk Festival, where I don't know if you played there with Rita.
I did.
Yeah, I played there with Buddy and the Boys, great festival. But he loved this idea, and he said, oh my, you must continue with it. He said, what are you calling it? And we said, we don't really know. We don't have a name.
No, and we had already decided at that point, we're going back and forth here, I hope people will indulge us. We had already decided at that point that if we were going to do a festival, we didn't want it to take place during a time when all of our music activity goes on in the summer, which is basically the 2 months of July and August. Yeah. So we were staying away from that completely. Yeah. And so we had decided to have it in the fall. And for some reason or other, the whole idea of how the fall is so beautiful in Cape Breton, in this discussion we were having, the three of us, and Brooke said, well, why don't you just call it Celtic Colours?
Yeah. And we said, great, we'll just use that. That'll be the working title. If we come up with something better, okay. Well, we didn't come up with anything better than that. I mean, that was just a keeper. You know, it encapsulates everything that we were trying to do. And the fall was the time for us. We had the whole island to ourselves. And we envisaged an island-wide festival. And so in those days, the tourism season would end. The island would essentially close. Labor Day weekend would be kind of the end of the tourist season. And we thought, geez, if we could just keep everything going, you know, for another, as it turns out, another month now. The tourism season is open until Thanksgiving. And Celtic Colours, you know, certainly has
made a big impact in that. And the thing is, I think, at the beginning, that was hard for people to envision that people would come specifically for that. Yeah. So we had to convince various funding bodies and sponsors that we wouldn't just be picking up on the people that were already here, as summer events would be. We would actually be adding to the addition
We
of people.
saw it. To us, it was just obvious, although it didn't exist, but it was obvious in a way that people would come from all over
Yeah.
to see something very special. And we should talk about, really the concept of the festival, the story of the festival, which was really, really important to us, just as when it would happen was really important to us. But that the festival be about something.
Yeah.
Which would then guide us in our decision making.
Well, and that refers to that conversation on the plane. We didn't sleep we got on the plane, and we just talked the whole night. And by the time we got to Halifax, the real form of the festival had taken not as big as it is now, of course, but the idea that we wouldn't step on the toes of the people already doing these things, so we wouldn't be in their season, and B, we wouldn't be bringing everybody to one central place.
That was key.
That was key, and we felt that the culture had been kept alive, slightly differently maybe in all the different communities, and that was the story.
Yeah, and that we wanted to celebrate that culture, a culture that was unique to this planet. Yeah, it had its roots in, a lot of its roots in Scotland, but it had its roots elsewhere, and it also had an indigenous component and a French component, and this was this beautiful Cape Breton culture that was unique, and it had incredible people, tradition bearers, dancers, musicians of all sorts, who we really felt needed to be celebrated more. We saw, at that time in the 90s, Rita McNeil was touring, the Bearers were touring, the Rankins were touring, and we could see, and we were managing John Allen Cameron, J.P. Cormier, and so we could see how Cape Breton performers were how excited people were in other parts of the world to see our people. But these people were our neighbors and our friends, and we would see them at church, and we would see them at the grocery store, and it was really no big deal. They were family, they were cousins. Whereas in the States and in Europe, they were like, boy, I remember in that first night, or one of the first nights at Celtic Connections in Glasgow, and meeting some younger Irish musicians who were enamored with my accent. I'm thinking, I have an accent? and where are you from? Nova Scotia. Well, really, I'm from Cape Breton. And they said, do you know Jerry Holland? And Jerry Holland, a wonderful man, a brilliant artist, a gentle soul, no longer with us. But at that time, Jerry, a wonderful composer and player, at that time Jerry made his living in Cape Breton as a carpenter. And imagine those hands and those machines. And in my head I'm going, I said, yes, not only do I know Jerry Holland, but I've performed with Jerry Holland in the Rise and Follies of Cape Breton. And it was as if to these young Irish musicians, it was as if I had just told them I had performed with Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
That's how you performed with Jerry Holland. They couldn't believe it. And I'm thinking, wow, Jerry at home is currently building stairs for somebody, to buy his groceries and playing on the weekends. And I thought, we were on to something here. I mean, Jerry Holland is like Elvis Presley in Ireland, and he's building steps at home. So we need to tell this story widely. And we had this notion that wouldn't it be great if instead of the musicians having to travel, the audience would travel to Cape Breton to hear them where they play, in the community halls where they played, where the tradition had been kept alive. Yeah. And that was the story that we wanted to tell with this festival, and that this festival still tells.
I think it really does. Yeah, it's a celebration. The community is always part of the consideration of putting together events. What works in your community, what is the history of your community, the cultural identity of your community, and how do those things express themselves, and that's why at a festival, you know, and that's how it's grown in many, many ways. You know, people have wonderful ideas, and they'll, if you listen, and I think that was an important part of getting it right. We didn't always get it right, but is listening.
Listening. I mean, the first people, after we got back from Scotland, the first people that we went out and actively engaged and sort of spilled the beans on this idea that we had were the musicians, were the artists.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think? Should we pursue this? Is this an idea that you could support? We didn't talk to business, we didn't talk to government, we talked to the artists first. And tradition bearers, like Archneil Chisholm.
Yeah.
A very, very important person in the history of the culture, and getting his endorsement and his support and his enthusiasm meant the world.
And we had to get a lot of support and endorsement because we were actually a private company, and we were trying to get the government to see this as a good investment. And so they said, you need to set up a not-for-profit with a board of directors, and the board of directors will basically make application for funding. And so that's how we went about it. And Archneil stepped up and agreed to be the first chair of the board.
Yeah, and he had great support from the Gaelic College.
Yes.
The director at that time, Sam McPhee, was enormously supportive, agreed to come onto the board as well. Yeah. So, you know, we were building kind of an army, you know, of people who were part of the tradition, people who supported the tradition. And we started to feel at a certain point like we could not be stopped. I mean, it became almost a mission.
Well, it did, and it had to be a mission, Max admitted, because, excuse me, the throat giving me trouble today. All the way through the process for the first up to 10 years, but not maybe quite that long. We never knew from one year to the next if we were going to have a festival the following year, and it was up to us to take the risk to go ahead and start working, because everything takes so long. But funding bodies don't necessarily know that, and they don't move nearly as quickly as you might need them to at times, and so we would just have to cross our fingers, hold our breath, trust, go ahead.
But one of the things, and this is where the board of directors was enormously helpful to us, one of the things that we did on their recommendation was keep a tight track of who the audience was. Yeah. Who's in the audience? And we still do it today, where we ask people to fill out a little ballot. They win a beautiful door prize, a very unique door prize. And we get to know where these people came from. And the government has various formulas that we used. We didn't invent this. Where we knew how many people were from every state in the Union, how many people were from every country. It's up to 26 or 30 different countries now. Every province and territory, every state, people would come. And we just figured out the economic return from those, using the government's own numbers, and we would feed that back to the government as a way of saying, this is what your investment is creating. Yeah. And it was a good, if you could get that kind of return on your own money, you wouldn't hesitate.
No, you wouldn't hesitate. And the thing is that if anybody's thinking of trying to start an event, the most important thing next to doing it well is to document and to keep track of all those things. How many people bought tickets? How many people from where? And unless you do that, they're just believing you, you know, unless you have some data to give them. So that you can't really blame the funders for wanting to know, is this really effective? Is my money, is my investment working? And so we always have done that. And as a result, the festival got credibility and continued to get funding eventually, because we could say, well, okay, if we've created $10 million of economic impact, and that's direct spending in a 9-day period in Cape Breton. What does that difference does that make? And they'd say, right. A lot of difference.
And so finally we were able to move beyond year-to-year funding, which was so debilitating. I mean, because we bring artists from all over the world to perform on stages with our Cape Breton artists. In fact, there's never been, I'm so proud of that, a show, to my knowledge, in the history of the 25 years of the festival where there wasn't a Cape Breton artist on stage.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Has to be. They're hosting the world, you know, and it's their culture that we're celebrating, so they must be on stage. And we always loved putting the world-class artists from Europe and other places on stage with our people, so that our audience, which makes up about 50% of the people who attend the festival, people from Cape Breton, could see their own artists in that light.
Right.
Wait now, there's this world-class artist, and our people are like killing it with them. So,
and they're playing together, and look at that, right?
Yeah. So that was, and that's part of the reason we always wanted to have a Cape Breton artist on stage. But yeah, we did finally, I don't know what year it was, where we finally, one of the government agencies, ECBC, I think, said, would it help if you had a multi-year commitment?
No kidding.
Of funding? And we're like, oh my, that's like happy birthday.
And it was around the same time the province started introducing their multi-years. And I mean, I was buried in funding proposals for years, and so
it was brutal.
It was brutal.
I bought Joella a clock one time. I saw, you know, a wall, an office clock that I saw online one day. And instead of numbers, it had right proposal would be like at the 1, and there'd be all the you know, fill out form would be instead of the 2, and then and on one number it would do art. was this?
You get one
clock.
Opportunity to do art in the whole process of the calendar.
I mean, we used to joke, but it was we were kind of serious that we were actually professional fundraisers who ran a festival in their spare time. We used to.
We used to joke about that. Yeah. So, are there any? Dawn is still with us. Are there any other questions coming in from our?
Well, I had a question
viewers?
about the very first show and the first night in the first year. How nervous were you both for that first special performance and kicking that night off at Center 200?
Terrified.
We were absolutely terrified. We'd managed to snag the Chieftains, you know, the biggest act in the Celtic world. Sharon Shannon, Natalie McMaster. We had an incredible show, pretty much a sold out. We had 3,000 or 4,000 people.
Yeah.
In Center 200, a big arena. And we were up in the rafters, sort of watching this, and just, you know, how is this going to go? And I remember, you know, Cape Breton people know the rhythm of Cape Breton music. Mm-hmm. You know, they express that through their body, and that's why Cape Breton music, traditional music, is dance music, and we express that music through our feet if you're not dancing. And we're very familiar with those rhythms. If it's a jig, we know. If it's a reel, we know. Sharon Shannon, a brilliant accordion player from Ireland, opened the show and played this blistering set of tunes. And at the end of there was sort of this polite applause, and we didn't. The audience was, I'd say, mostly Cape Breton people in that very first show.
Oh yeah, the first show, the first year, I think it was, and they would have no idea who she was.
Had no idea, and were unfamiliar with her rhythms, with the Irish traditional rhythms, and so she began to play the second set, and I started to hear a faint tapping sound, and I realized that it was feet. And then the tapping sound got louder and louder and louder as the audience became to understand her rhythms. And she finished that second set of music, and the place exploded in applause and screams. And I went, Mike, we're in. this is going to work. And that was the moment I knew. It was an incredible sense of relief.
Well, it's been wonderful to watch the kind of gradual buy-in. You know, a lot of Cape Breton people didn't ever leave the island, and so the only good music they heard was the very traditional Cape Breton music. And so you know, they're very protective about that, and we're somewhat worried about all these new people coming in from away. You know, was that going to mess up our music, or we wouldn't like it? We don't need that because we have all our own music. There's all those arguments we used to pick up around the outskirts of all of this, but. You know, they've really over the years opened their hearts to the music from all over the world that we've brought to Cape Breton, and now a lot of the really exciting people that they want to come see are the people from away that have come before. So they develop a whole new repertoire and a whole new appreciation for music from other places in the world, and it's been wonderful to see.
Yeah, and they formed personal relationships, and certainly with our volunteers, which that's a whole thing we should talk about as well. I mean, we have this enormous, the festival could not be done just straight out without, it was about 1,500. At one time, it's probably over 2,000 now, I don't know, volunteers. But these volunteers, oh my God, they're beautiful, beautiful people, and they love nothing better than showing off the island to visitors who are ticket buyers, or especially to artists. And wonderful personal relationships have been formed among all of those groups over the years. Artists love to come here.
Well, they do. They do love to come here. But it's a very different experience coming here than going to some sort of urban festival where they're trucked, you know, maybe in a bus from their hotel to the venue and back, and that's it.
And there's kind of a wall between them and the audience. They in many festivals they don't get to meet the audience.
Well, they don't ever go out and meet the audience. Well, we do things, always did things in the Cape Breton style, which is, you know, people are friendly, people want to help you, and so the volunteers that started from the very beginning some of them were drivers, and they would drive the artists out to the community venue, which might be an hour drive, might be an hour and a half drive. Got to know each other so well that some of the tightest friendships are between drivers and artists. And they've traveled, some of these drivers have traveled over to Europe, to Scotland, to go to other festivals and see their friends
like
who are artists.
You know, they're recognized from the stage. They proudly wear their driver jackets with the Colours logo and their name, and they're recognized from the stage by these world-class artists. We just want you to meet. There's some very special people in the audience. You know, there's like, you know, Obama or something. I mean, and it's so wonderful to see, and it's genuine. It's just totally genuine. So again, all of this goes back to the importance of the story. I think you were talking about some recommendations or what's important if someone was thinking about starting the festival. And after a number of years of doing Celtic Colours, we started to get asked to go and consult in Scotland and the States and different parts of Canada to community groups who were considering starting the festival. And they would look at our model and say, wow, that's so interesting. And we would always say, you know, Celtic Colours is a Cape Breton story. That's how we do Celtic Colours. What's really important for you is to tell your story. Every community has a story. And I think festivals that last are based on reality, are based on that community story. And the decisions around how to program that festival and other decisions on how to operate that festival, we think should be based on that community's story. And sometimes they need to hear that from people who don't live there, because it's a human frailty not to trust or value the stories, or I call it the gold, in their own backyard. It's just that we see it every day. How can that be interesting to anyone? How can that be? Well, it's totally interesting because it's a unique story to this planet. That's how interesting it can be. But when you see it every day and you grew up in it, sometimes it's just a human frailty to think, well, that couldn't possibly be interesting.
But it is important that people don't try to adopt a model or anything like that from somewhere else, because it might not work. It just might not work. And then you don't know why it didn't work. So you have to really do a thorough examination of your own community values, how things work, and before you start trying to tell their story and make sure you tell it right, you know? But yeah, it was interesting to watch how things developed. We got to the point where we really couldn't afford to do any more concerts. I mean, we got, you know, you don't make money doing this, okay? Just tell you. So we kept getting applications from communities, because the way we always did it is we didn't ask them to do anything. We asked them, if you want to do something, you apply to us and tell us why you think you're able to pull this off. Well, at a certain number of venues, we couldn't go any further that way. So we would sit down with the community and we would say, what else do you do in your community when it's not Celtic Colours time? And what else is important to the people who live here? And they'd start coming up with things, you know, well, we do square dances, or we do hikes, or we do dinners. Yeah. And so we started incorporating what we called community cultural events into the festival. There was another lucky time, okay? Yeah. Because the Department of Canadian Heritage, which was one of our funding bodies at a fairly low level at that point, had decided that community engagement was their new catchphrase. I mean, I don't mean this in any kind of negative way. It was the best idea. Yeah. And they actually contacted me in advance and told me this had happened. And our local, well, in Halifax, people sat down with me and said, you should start claiming and reporting every one of those community events and how many people. And so the documentation got even bigger than ever, but the result was a big increase in our funding, enough that we could hire a coordinator. Yeah. So we now have, and have had ever since, Yvette Rogers in that role, and she's just been brilliant.
But the benefit to the visitor, well, there was benefits to everybody. The community benefited by, we didn't take anything. We would promote their, whether it was a dinner or some sort of activity where they were teaching or hiking or what, we would promote through our streams the activity, but they would keep all the money. Yeah. And so that was of great benefit to the community. Their volunteers had a sense of pride in that they were part of the festival. The visitors had this amazing experience of during the days of activity. They became part of the culture, which is what we were trying to do. So just going we also started to learn about experiential tourism at that time.
That was another thing that was coming up.
Took a little switch at that time.
It did, yeah. And we just happened to be already on that track, which was good. Yeah. You know?
But the current studies at that time about tourism was that today's tourist was a different person. They were baby boomers. They were interested in learning, not just observing.
Not just passive. They want to get involved.
They want to have their hands. They want to touch, to feel, to taste, to smell, to partake in activities, not just sit back and watch activities. And so this whole slate of community activities was perfect for this new tourists.
Yeah, it really does. And it really has been the way in which the needs of the community and the needs of the visitors and all of even actually people all over the island going to other communities. Those needs have come together in a really positive way, so that the communities really take huge pride in how they pull off their event. They know they have to get approved by Yvette, right? And in the beginning, some of the events being proposed were kind of not appropriate, but most have been really, really great ideas. And what Yvette has been able to do is to sort of guide them to how's the best way they can make that happen, and then we promote it, and it goes from there.
So there are now, the first year there were 27 concerts.
27 concerts and a handful of workshops.
And now there are about 50 concerts 25 years later?
Yeah.
So it's doubled. but it's still manageable. I mean, but the community events are 300, 400?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're so varied, and which is great because if people are coming from different places and even our own local people, there's so many different interests. If you look at the schedule and you say, oh, that looks like fun, and you circle that, and just the things that you are interested in, maybe not the things other people would be interested in, and
Absolutely.
they can fill their time as they drive to their venue if they plan it well. And yeah, it's been lovely.
We have lots of fans of yours chiming in from all over the world. We have Saskatchewan and Florida, and we have some artists. Harold Hogarth and Margaret Stewart are chiming in.
Hi, Harold.
Hi,
Hi,
guys.
Margaret.
I have a question from Adam Young that what was the funniest thing that you can share with us today that happened during the festival? Love to hear about any time when things went a little sideways.
Ooh, have you got one off the top of your
I'm just
head
blank
there?
right now. Adam, you got me.
Yeah, things went sideways. Well, we certainly had some problems because of weather. Okay, and early in the festival, we had a couple of power outages where it wasn't really a disaster because the community jumped in and got a generator and so on. But later on in the years, when you had a power outage, it was a lot more widespread. So there was one year when the concert was just about to start at Bulladry School.
Guess who was supposed to perform in it?
That's why I bring it up, buddy. Because you had not performed in the festival
Never.
at all before. You had retired from your work with the festival. We asked you to come back, do this show, and what happened, Max?
The power went out in Bulladry maybe a half an hour before the show, and for safety reasons, we had to get everyone out of the building, and the show was canceled. My big breakthrough at Celtic Colours,
I know.
canceled. So it wasn't until this year, the 25th year, that
You got back.
That I got back. It was thanks to Don and Joella and I sang at the opening.
That was
which
so
was
much
lovely,
fun.
which was really fun.
So
with
much
a
fun.
great bunch of musicians.
But no, that's
it's nice to hear some musicians chiming in, and that means a lot.
Yeah.
I have another question from Georgette, who is asking, get Max or Joella to tell the story how the community meals came about. Maybe
I love that story. It goes back to what we were just talking about communities that wanted to do things but didn't have a suitable venue, or we couldn't afford to, do what had to be done in their venue. So I think the first one, if I'm not wrong, is Albert Bridge. So we always did community visits. Like we would go out and meet with their committees at each of the venues. And so they had felt they couldn't do a concert. And so we said, well, you got a brand new hall here. What are you doing in the hall? Oh, we have the best chicken dinners. They are widely known to be the best. And I said, oh, really? And I said, when you had your concert last year, what were people telling you? Where did they eat before the concert? She said, they were grumbling on the way in because they hadn't got a seat at a restaurant, or because they were out in the country, Albert Bridge, or they were carrying trail mix in their car all the time. And I said, maybe they'd like to have a nice meal before the concert. And sure enough, they put on one of the loveliest meals, and it just grew from there. Yeah. When one group saw how well it worked, and they just started, and we always worked with them in terms of what is their specialty in their community, because some have other different ones,
St. Peter's was deep fried turkey.
Oh, yeah.
Which the artists love. That was another thing, the communities, one of their responsibilities, besides providing the hall and selling 20% of the tickets and setting up the chairs and doing all that, was feeding the artists, because the artists are sort of headquartered in Bedeck or at the Gaelic College, but their venue might be an hour away from there, an hour and a half away, and they go in the afternoon to do sound checks and get ready for the show. Well, do they have to eat? So this was a requirement of the hosting committee. You must feed the artists and the volunteers. That was part of the, and this group began to grow into a bit of a contest because they would overhear the artists as they're having their dinner between the sound check and the show. They go, "This is pretty good, but boy, last night that deep fried turkey in St. Peter's, man, that was good." And so it became so you thought that was good. So then the next year the ante would be upped, and the dinners kept getting better to the benefit of the artists and the volunteers.
They loved it when they could brag, right?
Yeah.
And the artists, and they'd tell you, the artist told us this was the best supper yet.
Yeah.
You know, and artists always do that, right? And which is so nice, but it's really rewarding for those people who've worked in the kitchen all day and tried to make everything right. And on top of that, now we've got all these different diets and dietary requirements, and they have to figure out how to make something gluten-free and something. They're wonderful.
Yeah.
They're wonderful, and they do all of that, and it brings the community together too. Like in one case. There were two community churches which had never done anything together, and they actually came together and put on suppers for Celtic Colours, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I've always said what we were doing and what is still going on with Celtic Colours is really just community development. It's community development through culture, which is it's a beautiful way to do community development because it brings so much pride to people, and I think that's one of the pluses of Celtic Colours is that people can say, well, this represents quality, and that's where we come from.
Yeah, and quality is the key word in all of this, isn't it?
Well, it is, yeah.
Whether it's the artists on stage, whether it's the venues, whether it's the people driving them, and the training. I mean, the volunteers are not just set loose willy-nilly. Volunteers are trained by the festival in very specific tasks because we want quality in every level and every activity that takes place in the festival. So, quality, big time.
Big time.
Yeah.
I have a question from Tara. What has been the most surprising place where you have found Celtic music?
The most surprising place might have been, let me see, Cuba.
Cuba was one, and Spain as well, and they're both
Well,
related.
yes, Cuba as a result of Spain, because
Yeah.
there's a whole region of Spain that is considered to be a Celtic region, Galicia, and we've had Carlos Nunez and other people from those areas, right?
Yep.
But
We also made connections in Cuba. I've traveled to Cuba since 1977, I think was the first time I went there, and through the festival, we met some pipers in Havana. This is no joking here, folks. Bagpipers in Havana, and in fact, it was an emerging group. The bagpipes had dwindled, I believe, to one old man who was making the pipes and playing them, and he got some younger people involved, and now they're excited, and that was led to a really beautiful, couple of wonderful things happening.
We ended up bringing some of those players here and connecting them, and then of course there's a connection there with Carlos Nunez too, who was coming to the festival. So I think some of those people actually ended up moving to Nova Scotia, and there's been this wonderful connection continued through some folks in Halifax to the Cubans, and it's just been a nice.
It's been really nice. Actually, there was one lovely little moment too that happened at the opening show in Port Hawkesbury, I believe, the year that the Cuban musicians were here, and our lieutenant governor at that time was Mayan Francis, and we have a tradition of piping in the lieutenant governor, who generously comes to most opening shows of the festival. And we didn't have any, I think, Cape Breton pipers in that particular show, but there were some Cuban pipers. And you asked you said, look, the Lieutenant Governor, would you mind? And he said, sure.
Well, she would not only not mind, she was quite thrilled.
So it turned out, we didn't know this, but she was incredibly moved by being escorted into the room by the Cuban pipers because her father was from Cuba. We did not know this.
We did not know that. And she was moved. I mean, she was very thrilled that that happened. And those little special moments that, you know, you forget about them until you go back and really try to bring it back in your mind. But that was a special one, no question. And she was so moved by that. Yeah.
I have another question from Stephen, who's saying the heart of the festival is Celtic, but the scope also includes the other cultures of Cape Breton and beyond. Was the intention always to have traditions such as Acadian, Mi'kmaq, and even American folk music represented, or was this something that happened over time?
I think it's something that happened over time. I think that when we started out, I think our biggest concern was to support our local culture and to present our local culture the way it is normally presented, and if anything, give it more prominence, right? So what happened, of course, is because we've got communities in all over the island, some of which are Acadian and some of which are Mi'kmaq, those communities would say, we'd really like something, blah, blah, blah. And so it started with kind of easing in people from their own community or their own culture into these shows to the point where I would say a lot now of the shows in those other than Celtic communities have themes around their own culture. And I think that's much better. I think we just had to get there. And it took a while.
I think it took a while for us to understand that the Cape Breton culture and Cape Breton traditional music is more than Celtic music.
Well, yeah.
And that the interplay between these cultures historically, in many ways, in terms of supporting one another, was really an important part of the story. And how the music, there was wonderful fiddlers who lived in Escazone.
It's just completely crossed over, didn't it? Yeah.
So, and again, our culture is not a Scottish culture. Our culture is a Cape Breton culture, and that includes these other wonderful. So it took us, as we matured in our thinking, I think the festival matured in its presentation.
Yeah, and I think that communities spoke up, and we listened. And I think that was critical because they continue to be happy with what they're receiving, I think, and. The staff here Don works very closely with these communities and, delves into what they want and what their culture is and what the connections are between that culture and ours.
Yeah.
And that's how we're always trying to build those connections.
Yeah.
Good. Lovely.
All right.
I have a question kind of from a personal stage. Because as performers yourselves, did that touring musical and your onstage performance world help you to prepare to take on event management, or how did it, or if it didn't?
I think it did in a major way. We knew how artists were treated out in the world because we toured. Joella, you with Rita McNeil, you may know. I toured with a number of different Buddy and the Boys and some of the music comedy shows out of Cape Breton. And artists, unfortunately, are not always treated the best. Sometimes it's very, very difficult. It's an enormously difficult life that they lead. It's very unnatural. Some people think it's glamorous, but really it's not. They're traveling. They're trying to maintain their health and their diet, and all for 2 hours a day. Of being on stage, and we were very determined that starting this festival, that artists were going to be treated with respect, and that they were going to be treated in the finest way possible. And that was translated to everyone involved, to the volunteers, to the community groups, to everyone, that these are very special people. They've traveled a long way to be here, or they've been working very hard in their home communities if they were Cape Breton artists, and they need to be treated with respect. And that was really, really important, and I think that came from our backgrounds.
Oh, I think so too. And it's made such a difference in terms of people wanting to come here, not only to experience the culture, but the hospitality of our communities has been amazing.
Yeah.
For me, being part of that industry and that touring, I believe that I would never have been involved with Celtic Colours had I not had that experience of touring with Rita and working with some of the behind the scenes things for her, right?
Yeah.
And I told her that. I said, you know, you have contributed, besides your own career, I think you've had a big impact on why I did what I did.
Yeah. I think it's also worthwhile saying that we talked earlier about the first people that we had this idea. First people we spoke to were the artists, the Cape Breton artists. Is this a good idea? We needed to know whether they would come on board. And I think part of the reason, we knew them. And they knew us as artists. So we weren't some, you know, foreign people, you know, coming to them with some idea that was going to maybe be good for them and maybe not be good for them. They knew our hearts, I think, and they knew our backgrounds, and they knew where we were coming from. And I think that was also enormously important.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I really think it was. Yeah, because the trust was already there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, that was a good question.
I can relate a little bit. So, I mean, we've talked so much about all the positive things, and as successful as the festival has been, I do want folks to understand that true grit and depth of work that this event takes. And I wondered if you wanted to speak to any difficult moments you've had around this event, if you wanted to.
We had some difficult moments. We had a difficult year.
The dark year.
We called it the dark year. It was the year in which, for whatever their reasons were, the board decided to take a different direction. And we were not the owners of Celtic Colours. They were. And so they hired somebody else who came and said to us, we'd like you to do the job, but for half the money. Well, we were already, like, we were below the wages of anybody on poverty at that point. And so we had to say, we can't do that. It's not physically possible. And so that was it. We were out of the festival for a year.
And it was a trying time for us as a business. It was a trying time because over time, the festival began to represent more and more of a percentage of our annual business. But it was also trying personally. And I was really proud of us because we didn't, when volunteers or artists would contact us and say, what the heck is going on? We're thinking we don't want to be involved in this festival anymore. We always said, what is going on is between us and the board of directors. You need to stay with the festival. The festival needs you. And I'm proud of that.
Some of them came to us in tears because they thought it was going to be, disloyal to us if they stayed with the festival. And what we said was, what is more important is that you who know this job, do the job and keep the festival alive while we sort out anything that may come out of this.
Yeah. We asked them to be loyal to the festival, not loyal to us.
And they were.
And they were.
Most of them were. Some of them just found it really, really difficult because they were used to things being pretty well organized in the way we did things, and the people that took over for that year had never done it before ever. So it was difficult.
It was one of those deals, I think, where in retrospect, where Joella and I made it look a little too easy.
I agree.
Because we worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. That was very common. and we made it work. And we did it without a lot of fuss, and we didn't really talk a lot about what we were doing. And that was our bad, you know. So the board didn't really understand. It looked easy. However, as you know, Don, it's a very complex beast, this Celtic Colours Festival.
It is a very
For starters, it's
complex.
twice as long as any other festival, with a couple of exceptions around the world. But it's a very complicated event. And the board, to their credit, understood that partway into the festival. They were like, oh my heavens, this is not at all like we thought it was going to be. We thought it kind of ran itself. And to their credit, they came to us about 2 days after that year's festival and said, we've really made a mistake, and we apologize, and we want you guys to come back.
And we did, and we didn't hold any grudges, and we didn't, you know.
We bumped the price a little bit, let's be honest.
Yes, we did. But, you know, we eventually, I mean, not that the structural things are very interesting to people, but we eventually disbanded our company and became staff of Celtic Colours, and that, you know, changed in a way a relationship with the board, and it was a good thing.
Yeah, it was a good thing, and we didn't have time. The festival was growing to a degree where we didn't have time to do anything else.
Oh no,
anyway,
we didn't.
There was no sense having the business. Yeah.
I'll go with 2 questions to finish off here, but I'll start with this. This stranger, Margie Beaton, is asking, tell us about a memorable moment of overwhelming pride you felt that will stay with you for years to come. So cherished memories for you folks.
Oh, for me, it was the first Unusual Suspects and the reaction of the audience, because we had, again, no idea if they were going to accept this music played in an orchestra setting. And it was so outstanding. The music was so outstanding that the audience was swept away with it. And it's just been such a source of joy for me.
Gosh, I have so many of them. I do really cherish a visit. We got to, as time went on, we were able to help Cape Breton artists get work in other festivals around the world. From the very first year, I think, with the Buyers Program, we would help to bring people like us from other festivals around the world, in the hopes that they would see some Cape Breton artists and bring them to their festival. And that proved to be really, really valuable and opened up markets for our artists around the world. That's a wonderful thing that I'm very proud of that the festival did. It didn't have to do that. It just did it because it was important, you know. But I remember we also got to take artists sometimes to these festivals. And I remember one time we were able to arrange for Mr. McMaster.
Oh, we took Buddy and
Buddy
bunch
McMaster
of piano players.
And some piano players, Joey Beaton, Dave McIsaac, and we took them and we to the Celtic Connections Festival in Glasgow, where they performed. Gosh, I remember Buddy's performance was so beautiful, and I was just filled with pride.
Max always gets emotional. This one, because the whole room, it was in a beautiful theater, like the Strathclyde Suite, and each of the different accompanists played with Buddy, and then Burton McIntyre, bless you, Burton, we love you to bits, from Waikagama, always went over to the festival. Burton got a square dance going in the front, and people had never seen it before, and they just sort of stood up and went along the hall so they could watch this square dance, and the whole room was just, and these are not people, like in Scotland, you don't do that. You don't do the stomp your feet thing, right? They were all doing it, and it was so moving. It was beautiful.
Pretty nice.
Oh, I love this walk down memory lane. Well, I'll finish off with this last question that I have. What is your hope for the legacy of this event and how it continues to develop for the future?
We've already realized our hope and our dreams. I mean, to get to 25 years is something that we never conceived of. I mean, that was just never even on the table.
No, we couldn't think that far ahead. So it's been wonderful to see what has happened. But I mean, my hope is that the festival can hang on to that, you know, grassroots, authentic way in which it does things and what it's presenting, so that our culture continues to thrive and grow and change as it will naturally, but that, you know, we keep that happening, and we just involve the cultures of this island
that
and
the
promote
story
them.
continues to be told, and it is. You know, we have utmost faith in the people who have followed us, both on the board, certainly in the artistic direction and management and staff and the volunteers. All these people who have embraced this festival, which is ours.
Belongs to everybody, to the community.
Belongs to everyone, and I'm filled with gratitude, and I'm very confident that this festival of ours will continue to be nourished and will in turn continue to nourish the culture.
Yeah, that's our big wish.
It's been a pretty good gig.
Thanks, Don, and thanks to everybody
Thank you, Don.
for watching and for your questions and for giving us a chance to get together and to reminisce, because we could do it by the hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's been lovely. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you both so much.
Okay.
Take care.